Okay. You're going to tell me when. Good morning, and thank you all for joining me here today. As we approach April 15th tax filing deadline, Californians are once again feeling the sting of the short-sighted so-called Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. The state and local tax deduction, often referred to as the SALT deduction, is a federal tax benefit that encourages state and local investments in infrastructure, public safety, home ownership, and education. Prior to the passage of the TCJA, over 43 million tax filers claimed this deduction, representing over 100 million Americans. In California, 1 out of 3 California taxpayers claimed the SALT tax deduction, and the average deduction was over $18,000. In order to partially offset the corporate tax breaks contained in the TCJA, Republicans in Washington, D.C. decided to raise taxes on millions of working families by capping the SALT deduction to $10,000. To rub even more salt in this wound, the $10,000 cap is the same for both single and married filers, which means that the TCJA penalized married couples and their children simply for having a family. The proponents of this change were not shy about their intent. They were driven by politics and meant to punish the residents of blue states. This change was designed to make it harder for state and local governments to invest in critical public infrastructure and services that we desperately need. With the TCJA not expiring till the end of 2025, I am proud to introduce AJR 15 today, urging Congress to revisit this misguided decision and avoid efforts to double down and extend the cap. Congress must lift the SALT cap so that millions of hardworking California families are not unfairly penalized because of the state in which they live. Next, I would like to introduce Assemblymember Blanca Rubio.
Thank you and good morning. Thank you, Assemblymember Irwin, for highlighting the important issue by introducing AJR 15. Let's be honest. Tax filing season is never, ever fun for anybody, and it's just around the corner. It is stressful for so many of us because of how confusing and complicated it can be. One thing that isn't complicated, however, is the impact that the SALT cap enacted by Republicans in Congress and the former president had on my constituents. Like all of my colleagues, residents in my district work hard for their paychecks. So when the TCJA passed and tax season rolled around again, I heard loud and clear from the people in my community that they were upset, as I was. People that had previously received refunds on their federal taxes were now surprised to find that they now owed money to the IRS, even though their income stayed the same. Overwhelmingly, I heard from married couples that were rightfully offended that would have been better off if they could file their taxes separately. That is not good for families, and it's simply not fair. As my colleague explained, these changes were about smart tax policy. They were meant to penalize the diverse states like California that make up the backbone of the American economy. This issue is so important that it has even garnered bipartisan support in Congress. In fact, the House of Representatives have voted 3 times to increase the SALT cap. As Congress begins working on tax legislation to extend or replace the TCJA, I hope that AJR 15 sends a message to lift the SALT cap and restore fairness for married couples. Thank you for being here. And next, I would like to introduce my dear colleague and Assemblymember Evan Lowe. Wait, Evan Lowe. Inside joke.
Not heard that before. I want to thank Assemblymember Irwin and joining our amazing female colleagues who understand the importance of equity, but also the importance of younger families. And as a millennial, understanding that this disproportionately hurts the opportunity for the California and American dream, that is that of MAGA Republicans in Congress who have weaponized the legislative proposals in punishing blue states. And let's call it what it is. This is that of the essence of MAGA Republicans, and that's why we need members of Congress to address the issue and helping support everyday Californians, no pressure, Laura, and joining Congress to help address these different issues. Secondly, what's important is that this is a reflection of us addressing the inequities that exist, but also welcoming our colleagues, our Republican colleagues, in joining in support of acknowledging the importance of what is right, what is just, and helping to support young families in California and for the future. That's what this conversation is about. That's what this AGR is attempting to do, and we hope that we can create a greater sense of urgency. If you are watching, ask your members of Congress, ask your state representatives in addressing the SALT deductions and helping to ensure that we provide the equity and the California and restore the California and American dream that we so desperately deserve. Next up is Assemblywoman Dawn Addis.
Good morning, and thank you, Assemblymember Irwin, for convening this incredibly important issue. I will say that I am here today simply because California is expensive enough, and it's absolutely time for change, and we have the tools to make change. Californians are grappling with increased cost of living, soaring utility rates, high rents, and so much more that is making the California dream simply unreachable for hardworking families. So this is why I'm joining my colleagues in co-authoring AJR 15 and calling on our federal leaders as well as our California Congressional Delegation to lift the cap on the state and local deduction, or the SALT, a cap that disproportionately affects many people in my district on the Central Coast. To pay for President Trump's 2017 tax changes, which we all knew were bad at the time, Republicans in Congress unfairly capped the SALT deduction at $10,000 for both single and joint filers. The deduction before that had no limits. So President Trump absolutely knew what he was doing to blue states, to coastal residents. We didn't like it then, we don't like it now, and it's time for change. So Congress is considering legislation that would provide parity, and we need them to act. It's a common sense solution that can help Californians right now. So I urge Congress to repeal the state and local tax deduction limitation that unfairly penalizes so many Californians. And now I would like to introduce Assemblymember Friedman.
Thank you, and good morning. I want to first thank Assemblymember Irwin for her leadership on this issue. I am joining you here today as a proud co-author of AJR 15. As you have heard from many of my colleagues, this is a huge issue for people in California. In fact, I've been asked by residents in my community about the SALT tax many times over the past few years. When young families are contemplating the ability to buy a home, which is already so out of reach for so many of our families, they do the calculation to see what that purchase is going to cost them, what it's going to cost them each and every month. And when the taxes imposed by the Trump administration are calculated in, that can just put that dream of home ownership out of reach for far too many people in California. You know, combined with the 39 million people that call California their home, this state pays 1 out of every 8 federal tax dollars. So we send a tremendous amount of resources to the federal government that's then dispersed all across the United States. Added up, California pays $378 billion in federal income tax. Then came the Republican Congress and Donald Trump. So in 2017, they wanted to give tax breaks not to working people of America, but to the richest billionaire class who were their donors, and to very large corporations in the hopes that that money might somehow trickle down to working people. Well, it didn't. What it did do was put a disproportionate burden on homeowners, and particularly on homeowners in blue states where property values were higher. The bill was so expensive that they had to add $2 trillion that they shifted over to the homeowners, not to those corporations and not to those billionaires. So this bill is the law of the land right now, but Congress has the ability to change things back to the way they used to be before the Trump administration. And I join my colleagues in urging our members of Congress, both Republican and Democrat, to say enough is enough. The rich should be paying their fair share, and we need to do more to protect working Californians and to put that dream of homeownership into the sights of every working family. Thanks so much. Sorry. Next, I'd like to introduce my wonderful colleague, Assemblymember Cotty Petrie-Norris.
Thank you, and good morning. I'm Assemblywoman Cotty Petrie-Norris, proud to represent California's 73rd District in Orange County, and proud to be here today as a co-author of AJR 15. AJR 15 is calling on our federal partners to eliminate the cap on state and local tax deductions. Because of this Trump tax law, many California families are paying twice on their hard-earned income. This is hurting California families. This is hurting the constituents who we represent. It is time to repeal this Trump tax law and put money back into the pockets of hardworking California families. I want to thank Assemblymember Irwin for her leadership on this issue, and all of my colleagues for leading on this issue and calling on our federal partners to act now. With that, I'm pleased to introduce my neighbor in Orange County, Assemblymember Sharon Quirk-Silva.
Thank you, and good morning. I'm Assemblymember Sharon Quirk-Silva, which represents North Orange County and parts of Los Angeles. I, too, stand along my colleagues here and Assemblymember Jackie Irwin as a co-author to announce the introduction of AJR 15. For too many of our constituents, this tax season deadline brings with it a sense of frustration and unfairness due to the limitations imposed by the Tax Cuts and Jobs Acts of 2017. The provisions limiting the deduction of state and local taxes has disproportionately affected Californians, particularly those in high tax areas. This joint resolution sends a clear message that to our constituents during this tax filing season that we hear your frustration and we are taking action to address it. No, it is not just this tax that is compounding the effect on hardworking Californians. We know that it's everything from insurance rates to gas prices that are really making Californians struggle as they look at their bills every single month. We cannot stand by idly while California constituents bear the brunt of these unfair tax policies. It's our duty as legislators to advocate for the interests of the people we represent, and that is exactly what we are doing with AJR 15. I urge my colleagues and the legislature to support this resolution, and I call on our federal representatives to prioritize the interests of hardworking Californians by lifting the SALT deduction cap. I want to thank you and welcome back our leader here, Assemblymember Jackie Irwin, for concluding remarks.
Thank you very much, and I would like to thank all my colleagues for coming here today to announce this resolution. While this resolution will move through the legislature in the weeks to come, we want our constituents to know that we hear you and we are standing with you. And with that, we will wrap up this press conference unless there are any questions. We must have answered them all. Thank you very much.